A man wanted for the shooting of an 11-year-old girl in Antioch has surrendered to authorities. Antioch police tell us 23-year-old Ryan Hardy turned himself in yesterday at the San Francisco County Jail.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
It was just another quiet evening in Antioch, California. The soft hum of an SUV, its tires crunching against the asphalt. A father and his 11-year-old daughter, surrounded by loved ones, cruising out of their apartment complex. Delta Fair Boulevard, a street many had driven 1,000 times, unaware that this would be the one that would forever change their lives. Then, in the blink of an eye, the sound of a bullet shattered that calm. A shot fired through the passenger window. And just like that, a life was altered forever. But who was the real target? This wasn't supposed to happen. It was never meant to be them. Yet, a split-second decision would set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Who pulled the trigger? And why? The answers lie in the twisted web of mistaken identities and brutal intentions. But as the truth unravels, one question remains: could this family ever truly feel safe again? What happened? Why? And who was the real target? Stay with us. It was 7 p.m. on January 5, 2026, a Friday evening in Antioch, California, a town where most people would say they feel safe. The apartment complex on Delta Fair Boulevard was quiet, its typical hum of suburban life filling the air. Families, neighbors, and children out for evening walks, all just going about their business. It was a moment that felt ordinary, routine, a simple evening drive. But on that night, everything would change. Inside an SUV, a father, his 11-year-old daughter, and 3 other family members were preparing to leave the parking lot. They had no way of knowing that their evening would soon turn into a nightmare. The father, sitting behind the wheel, a routine drive in his mind. The daughter, in the passenger seat, possibly chatting, maybe just looking out of the window, unaware of the fate that was about to strike her. Everything seemed calm, until it wasn't. Without warning, a loud crack rang through the air. The sound of a gunshot, sharp and sudden. The bullet flew through the passenger side window, hitting the young girl squarely in the head. Everything froze. Time seemed to stretch, but reality quickly rushed in. The car jolted, a sudden panic gripping everyone inside. The father, eyes wide, barely processing what had just happened, reached for his daughter. The vehicle lurched as the father tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding before him. Blood. Fear. The unbearable confusion of seeing your child in danger when there's nothing you can do. The world outside the car blurred into a nightmare. As the shockwave of the bullet tore through their lives, the whole neighborhood seemed to stop in its tracks. Neighbors rushed to their windows, some hearing the shots, others watching in disbelief as paramedics and law enforcement swarmed the scene. It was too late to undo the damage. The young girl, sitting where she always sat, was now fighting for her life in the most unimaginable way. The father couldn't comprehend the terror he felt in that moment, the weight of that gunshot still echoing in his chest, even as paramedics worked to stabilize his daughter. In the midst of all the commotion, one question kept swirling in everyone's minds: was this family the intended target? Despite the chaos, it seemed like a random act of violence. But as the authorities soon learned, this wasn't just an unfortunate happenstance. No, this was a crime born of confusion, of mistaken identity. The shooter, later identified as 23-year-old Ryan Hardy, had made an assumption. He believed his intended target was sitting inside that vehicle. But in reality, it was an innocent family, completely unaware of what was about to happen. The entire community was left in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. Antioch, with its quiet streets and family-oriented feel, wasn't the kind of place where something like this usually took place. The residents were left grappling with the aftermath of such senseless violence. How did they get here? How did one simple decision, one moment of rage, lead to an innocent child's life hanging in the balance? In the weeks that followed, the tragedy would ripple through the town, leaving a scar that no one would forget. The question that lingered, though, was one that no one could quite answer: what if you were caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? As the police continued their investigation, they would uncover more about Ryan Hardy. But the truth behind that shot, the truth behind the misunderstanding, would take time to reveal itself fully. And until it did, the family, the community, and the victim would all be left with the consequences of a tragedy no one saw coming. The shrill wail of ambulance sirens pierced the night, cutting through the stunned silence of the apartment complex. It was a blur. A rush of frantic 911 calls, panicked voices, and the cold urgency of the situation setting in. As the paramedics arrived, the father clung to the hope that his daughter, his 11-year-old little girl, would make it through. But the look on their faces said it all. In the back of the ambulance, the father's voice broke. "She says, Dad, why can't I see?" Those words, so simple, yet so heavy, echoed in his mind as the car sped toward the hospital. His heart raced as the horrifying truth began to sink in: his daughter had been struck by a bullet, and her future, their future, was now uncertain. When they reached the ICU, doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her. Her vision was gone. A life once filled with color, now swallowed by darkness. "Doctors are fighting to save her life," the father said, his voice trembling, filled with disbelief. The road ahead was unclear. Would she recover? And if so, what kind of life would she lead? But the trauma didn't end when they reached the hospital. The family's world, already torn apart by violence, was now overshadowed by fear. A GoFundMe page was set up to help with medical bills, but the family knew the battle wasn't just physical. The fear of retaliation, of more violence, hung over them like a dark cloud. Hardy wasn't just a criminal, they knew there were others out there who had helped him, and the threat felt real. The emotional toll on the family was immense. Flashbacks to the girl's carefree life before that fateful evening haunted the father. She had once ridden her bike, laughed with friends, and felt safe in her own neighborhood. Now, everything was different. Ryan Hardy was no stranger to trouble. At 23, he already had a criminal past, with connections to shady individuals and a history of erratic behavior. To many in Antioch, he was known for his temper and unpredictability, a young man who seemed to walk on the wrong side of the law. But what made this crime particularly chilling was the fact that the shooting, a violent attack on an innocent family, was a case of mistaken identity. Hardy, in his rage and confusion, had thought his intended target was inside that SUV, and he was wrong. As the investigation began, the Antioch Police Department worked tirelessly, piecing together the few fragments of evidence they had. Witnesses, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence led them to Ryan Hardy. The pieces fell into place, but Hardy was nowhere to be found. "We've identified people helping him hide," a police spokesperson said. The task now was not just to find Hardy, but to understand who was behind his actions, who had aided him, and why. The community's response was mixed. Some were quick to label Hardy as a dangerous criminal with a violent past, while others recounted stories of his temper and gang affiliations. But all agreed on one thing: no one expected him to commit such a senseless act. The neighborhood, once familiar and safe, now felt tense, uncertain. The streets were filled with police cars, but Hardy remained elusive. Could this suspect really be responsible for such a senseless act? The question haunted the town as the search for answers continued. On January 9, 2026, 4 days after the shooting, Ryan Hardy walked into the Antioch Police Department and surrendered without resistance. His quiet confession sent shockwaves through the community. In a world where many try to avoid accountability, Hardy faced the reality of his actions. But the question still lingered: why? What drove him to pull the trigger that day? Investigators delved into Hardy's past, hoping to understand the man behind the violence. They uncovered a complicated web of broken relationships, unresolved trauma, and deep personal frustrations. Hardy's upbringing was marked by instability, abusive family dynamics, financial stress, and a sense of being lost in the world. All these factors, it seemed, had built up inside him, leading to a tragic, irreversible mistake. As it turned out, the family inside the SUV wasn't the intended target. Hardy, in his confusion, had thought someone else was in that vehicle, someone he believed he needed to hurt. But in the chaos, it was an innocent 11-year-old girl who paid the price. Who was the true target? What had convinced Hardy that the family was in danger? What could have possibly driven him to make such a deadly mistake? The questions remained, and the truth seemed further out of reach. The aftermath of the shooting rippled through the community of Antioch, a place where families once felt safe. Neighbors who had once seen the family around, going about their daily lives, now noticed their absence. Donna Ford, a longtime neighbor, couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. "You see their family out all the time," she said, "but now you see no one. It's kind of scary." The crime had shattered not just a family, but the sense of security that had always defined their neighborhood. For the family, the emotional toll was overwhelming. The father, still haunted by the memory, spoke about the heartbreaking moment when his daughter, blinded by the bullet, asked, "Why can't I see?" He choked up, saying, "It hurts me so much." The trauma had irrevocably altered their lives. Every day now was filled with fear, loss, and an uncertain future. As the family tried to cope with the unimaginable, the community, too, was left to question, could you live with the knowledge that your child's life could have been taken for no reason at all? As the trial began, Ryan Hardy was charged with 5 counts of attempted murder and assault with a firearm. The prosecution wasted no time, presenting Hardy as a reckless, dangerous individual who showed little regard for the lives he destroyed. They painted a picture of a man who, in a moment of violent confusion, pulled the trigger on an innocent family. On the other side, the defense attempted to argue that Hardy's actions were a result of his troubled mental state, one shaped by a history of pain, isolation, and unresolved trauma. For the family, the road to justice was anything but easy. As the young girl's recovery remained uncertain, the emotional weight of the trial began to take its toll. The family knew that their testimony was crucial, not just for justice, but for healing. Every day in court felt like another battle. As the legal process unfolded, the tension in the courtroom built. Can the justice system bring closure to a family shattered by violence? The family's fight for justice was far from over, and the emotional stakes had never been higher. The family, though grateful for the progress, knew their lives would never be the same. The young girl's recovery, both physical and emotional, was far from over. Each day presented new challenges, but they continued to fight, holding on to hope in the face of uncertainty. As they reflected on the pain they had endured, it became clear, this was a journey that would shape them forever. The community, once paralyzed by fear and disbelief, slowly began to heal. But the emotional scars remained, and the questions lingered. In the end, justice will be served, but the damage done will forever linger. What does justice look like when it can never truly heal the wounds of violence? Can closure ever be achieved after such a senseless act? What will happen to the family now, and can they ever truly move on from this trauma? How much damage can one person's action cause? And can we ever truly forgive the past? Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your life who might be suffering in silence, if it reminded you to listen more carefully to those who cannot easily speak for themselves, then please remember to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this one. Your support makes these stories possible. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop listening to the people who need you.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.